Views and opinions expressed are not necessarily those of the staff or management of the Flavors of Northwest Arkansas podcast.
Hi there. Hope you had a great St. Patrick's Day weekend. I'm John Engelman. Thanks for being here. This week we are in Rogers at Heirloom at the 1907 talking with co-owner and chef Jason Paul. But before we get to him,
Food news.
We are anniversary heavy this week. Happy 75 years to Maxine's in Fayetteville. As you guys heard on the food news segment last week, they were setting up for a big night to celebrate, which was last night. I couldn't make it, but I bet I know some people that did. And if they did make it, I'm sure it was an absolute throwdown. I bet many of those folks could use a burger today, and I have just the place. Patrick's in Springdale is celebrating their 54th birthday. Owner Keisha Wilson tells us how they'll be celebrating.
We're going to give away some like $54 gift cards to our giveaways to our customers, and maybe do some other stuff. I'm not sure yet. We may be celebrating the rest of the month.
Just down the road a bit, Susan's celebrated their 29th birthday this past weekend. They celebrated by giving out prizes and some of their delicious desserts. The Odd Soul in downtown Springdale turned 8 on Sunday, and to commemorate the occasion, owner-operator philosopher Jeffro Brown decided to shave off the part of his beard that he dyed to play Santa over the holidays. And it was all in celebration of 8 years.
Man, it's wild. I'd really like to print myself off a growth chart like you always see in movies on like company meetings, where it's that red line that goes up a bit, down a little, and up more and down again. 'Cause I feel like ours has been healthy growth.
Looks like this might be a yearly tradition at the Odd Soul.
I think I'll think it through a little better, but definitely going to bleach again for Christmas, and maybe dye it green or red for St. Patty's Day before trimming it. But yeah, I think this could be a thing.
Apartment 7 Lounge and Eatery in Fayetteville is getting closer to launching. I talked with owner GM Cody Gregg, and he thinks that they're about 3 to 4 weeks away, but as with anything, that could all change. But they're getting close, and we'll keep you updated. The Spice and Tea Exchange opened in downtown Bentonville this weekend. You might recall that the store was originally on A Street, and they had to close for road construction. Owner Nicole Green tells us how they ended up opening in downtown.
The gentleman that owned it, a very wonderful owner, he decided to retire, and we miss him very much, but that left the ability to open back up the store. A couple of years later, we missed it and loved it so much that my husband and I decided to try to bring it back, and it was an adventure, and here we are.
Keeping things in downtown Bentonville, congrats to Mezzaluna Pastaria as they're the first certified green restaurant in Northwest Arkansas. That designation comes from heightened levels of sustainability, including reducing waste, conserving energy, and sourcing local ingredients. One of my favorite stories from last year was with a podcast with Mezzaluna owner Chef Sergey Peters, where he talked about being the executive chef of the 1990 World's Fair in Russia and Siberia. Unbelievable. If you want to check that out, that episode was October the 23rd. The 8th Street Market in Bentonville is getting a homegrown restaurant. They posted on Sunday that they'll be opening in mid-April. We'll keep you updated. Still a few CSA shares available through Cobblestone Farms. Simply put, it's a crop share for you and your family, and you can pick it up in Bentonville or Fayetteville. Check out Cobblestone Farms on social media for more information. Proceeds go to help the food insecure in our area. Thai Spice officially opened their Springdale location on Saturday. They've been open on Weddington and Fayetteville for 6 years. Why open in Springdale? Co-owner Nicole Ling tells us.
My family and I decided, it's about time, we expand our business and let other people try our food from different locations.
And how about this? The folks that ran the Waffle Hut in Rogers are now heading a new breakfast service at Smokin' Joe's in Rogers. It runs Tuesday through Saturday from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Northwest Arkansas now has a gluten-free brewery. Stoic Brews has officially opened in Bentonville. Co-owner Jay Davitt explains why they went the gluten-free route.
When we decided to do something like this, we were originally going to do just a regular, gluten beer, with the different grains that they use normally. And Rebecca said, well, I don't know if I want to do that because, I'm sensitive to gluten. And she said, well, if we can figure out a way to do it gluten-free, let's do it. And at the time, we didn't even know that there was a gluten-free option.
And there's plenty for them to learn. Taproom manager Brandy Wills has been busy.
You know, we did our soft opening on Wednesday and Thursday, and so that was kind of our, trying to run through everything and make sure everything ran good and smoothly. And, not only are we pouring beer, but we're doing mocktails and cocktails. So, like, learning how to, do those and put those together. So it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun just trying to get it together.
Heirloom at the 1907 is reservation only. It's a tasting menu restaurant in the Onyx building in downtown Rogers. We talked to co-owner and executive chef Jason Paul, who along with his partner Danielle have built something unique in our area. If you've not been, you're not quick enough. Let's just say this. If Taylor Swift were playing at the Amp, you might have a better chance of getting a ticket there. But Chef Jason has a tip for you on that front. They don't seat many, and if you get a reservation, the seat is yours for the night. Though it's a tasting menu, it has many courses, sometimes up to 10. Chef Jason's from Arizona and got his first kitchen experience in a restaurant when he was 14, and it was all because of a book signing. It's a great story. The kitchen where he worked at that age, it just so happened to be the nicest restaurant in Phoenix. He'll explain. And what's it like to work in a Vegas kitchen under the age of 21? Jason's got the details. Finally, how did he end up in Northwest Arkansas? Well, it's the way many people do. We talked to Chef Jason Paul from Heirloom at the 1907, and that's next, right here on The Flavors of Northwest Arkansas.
Teachers are dynamic leaders, shaping a new generation. Innovating to prepare students for our fast-changing world. They're skilled experts, discovering a universe of solutions, telling stories, inspiring, mentoring, connecting cultures, leading by example. Teaching is a journey that shapes lives. Are you ready to begin? Explore teaching at teach.org.
Welcome back. We are at Heirloom at the 1907, and we're with executive chef and co-owner Jason Paul. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate
pleasure,
it.
yeah.
This is a great place.
Appreciate it.
Walking in, I thought, ooh, yeah, I like this. I like this concept. It's all just right here, and you're basically cooking in front of people, by the way.
Yeah, it's like a living room almost.
It's
honestly.
a great living room. I wish it were my living room.
I agree with you. Although I spend more time here than my living room.
Well, that's probably true. Tell me a little bit about the name Heirloom at the 1907.
Yeah, so we had a restaurant around the corner in downtown Rogers. We started there as a pop-up. It was a lunch restaurant. A friend of mine introduced me to the owner. They weren't doing anything at night. So when Danielle and I had first moved back here from Maine, we started just doing pop-up dinners at night. Eventually that led to us taking over the restaurant. That place was called Heirloom Food and Gifts. We just dropped the food and gifts part because we kind of figured people knew that we served food.
Right.
And we didn't sell gifts anymore. And so, yeah, it just became Heirloom. And then when we moved locations in 2019 to this building, the name of this building was the 1907, named after the year that it was built. So we just called it Heirloom at the 1907.
It makes all the sense on earth.
Yeah.
It's very common sense.
Well, it makes more sense once you hear that, probably. But yes,
Sure.
That's exactly.
For those that have been around, and for those that haven't been around, God forbid we get new people here in Northwest Arkansas.
I know,
right?
there's only a few coming.
Just a few, but they come in like, oh, that's a cool name. Boy, they must have come up with that themselves. That's great.
Yeah, well, Heirloom, it was like they were, it was the lunch portion of that was very like farm driven, so it was more like heirloom seeds, not like heirlooms, like family heirlooms. So, because a lot of people think like, how does an heirloom make its way in? But it's like an heirloom tomato or something like that.
Gotcha. Well, that's great. Tell me a little bit about the name Pinky Swear.
Pinky Swear.
Which, by the way, is the cocktail bar just outside the door.
That's right, yeah. And actually, strangely, opened 2 years ago today. So,
well, happy anniversary.
Appreciate that.
Let me just stop you there and ask what kind of celebration you guys are going to be doing.
It's going to be low-key. I'm celebrating with you. We just had a really cool little party.
Nice.
Saturday night, though, celebrating Women's day. So
there you go.
I think we'll take that.
Yeah.
And we're also rolling out a new menu here in the next couple of weeks out there.
Nice.
Which will be for the, we kind of did a little 1 year where our menu out there is like a record sleeve because we're a record bar. So we had this menu design that's kind of like a 7-inch record sleeve for a 45.
Right.
So we came out with one cover when we opened. We changed it a year later as like a new record.
That is awesome.
And so we'll probably do something like that again here in the next month or two.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, yeah, back to the name, Pinky Swear.
Yeah, so that was just a name that Danielle, who's my partner in life and business, and I had laying around. We just always have a list of names that would be cool for a business. That was like top of the list one, and we just hadn't found the reason to use it yet.
Right.
We almost changed the name of Heirloom to that when we moved over here, but we'd already had a fairly large following. That's why we didn't change the name fully.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Pinky Swear was just, we knew the branding could be cool around it, and it kind of rolled off the tongue, but it was also like, Pinky Swear is kind of like a promise. So it's like, this is like a commitment and a promise to keep the integrity and like keep the hospitality side up and, keep like a commitment to the community to be there for everybody. And so it's got that deeper meaning, but it also just kind of, I think it's pretty cool. So it kind of worked. And then once we started having a friend of ours do the actual like illustration and branding, we were like, okay, this can actually be really cool.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where it came from. And it just sort of pinballed from there.
That's great. That's amazing. Yeah. It's funny when you said that. We've got a list of names that we keep. Are you one of those like me, like every now and then you're like, ooh, that'd be a cool band name?
Oh yeah, like in here all the time. One of the people we work with will say something like, something aluminum foil, and I'll be like, oh, aluminum foil, water. That's a cool band name.
Yeah,
something like that.
I just tripped on a broom.
That's a broom.
Tripped on a broom. That's it.
That's it.
That's it right there. Except it's actually not. Okay. Tell me where you're from.
Originally born and raised Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay, all right. You're out of the desert now.
I am. I'm a desert rat.
Yeah, you are.
Spent almost at this point. I've been in Arkansas a little less time total than there, but yeah, that's where I spent most of my time.
Okay. You got into cooking at a very young age.
I did. We're talking like mid 90s at this point.
Okay.
Both of my parents worked, so I'd come home from school, was watching like great chefs, great cities on PBS. This is like 13 years old. Just was like, that looks cool.
This is before all the celebrity chefs.
Yeah, this was like pre-Food Network. I mean, maybe it existed, but I didn't have it on cable at that point, or there wasn't like a, Bobby Flay didn't have 4 shows yet or whatever. But he did have the show on PBS. It was like Grilling and Chilling or something like that. Mesa, when he had like Mesa Grill. This was early. So, that, like Graham Kerr, Jacques Pepin, even Julia Child still a little bit.
Wow.
And I just started watching that stuff after school, like mindlessly kind of just decompressing after a school day, and thought, oh, that'd be kind of cool. Started getting more into it, I guess.
Did you cook at home around that time?
I started to.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing. I feel like the first few times I cooked was like, I think I made some like Oreo cookies from scratch or something.
Wow.
But they probably weren't very good. And then I remember my dad had like a kind of like a Christmas type party for his group at work, and I think I actually quote catered it, but I like cooked something. It was like a capon or something stuffed with something. I mean, probably more ambitious than the result. I don't think it tasted as good as I thought it probably did.
It's better that than the other way.
Yeah. But long story short is I'm basically started getting more into it, and I started like subscribing to like Savor magazine, and this is, kind of pre-internet. There wasn't YouTube. You weren't learning that way. You were learning through books and literature. So, I just started reading a lot, and one of the books that I had was called Flavors of the Mediterranean, and the guy who wrote that book was like doing a book signing at like Barnes & Noble or Borders or one of those back in the day. And I went with my dad. He took me, and in that line, while we were like waiting to get this book signed, I met, there was a guy in front of us, and he was a chef that ended up kind of being like, hey, if you're really interested, here's my card. You should come check out the restaurant sometime. And that was around 14, and that was kind of when things changed.
Fortuitous.
Yeah,
that placement in line.
It was. honestly.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, tell folks who it was.
Yeah, so that was Chef Alex Strada, also known as Alessandro Strada. Maybe not as like popular these days on social media and all that stuff, but you know, did a stint on like Iron Chef as one of the actual Iron Chefs. And at this time, he was like on the regionally known, maybe not like nationally known.
Okay.
You know, he was probably like in his like early 30s at this time.
It was hard back then to be nationally known, pre-internet and everything else.
It was very different. You know, it just wasn't the same as it is now. And you know, it was more like newspaper articles or like magazine articles.
That's right.
Would get you like, you know, a review came out in like the Phoenix New Times or Phoenix paper, and it would like make its way or whatever. You know, James Beard and all that existed. But he had yet to like win those awards when I first met him. So it was like pre all of like the kind of notoriety that came for him in the next few years.
So, and you were 14?
I was 14. And this is a different time, I guess, in history too, where it was kind of like, hey, if you want to come in and hang out, you know, I'm not sure if
there's not an insurance issue.
Yeah. And so he gave me a card, or my dad a card, and I think my parents maybe encouraged me to call him. I think I was too nervous to, or I didn't want to. I can't really fully remember, but I did. And I did go into the kitchen, and I just kind of hung out. I didn't really do anything. I think I just kind of stood there and watched. Maybe I picked some herbs or something.
Sure.
And yeah.
So at that age, what hooked you in?
It's a tough call. You know, the first time, honestly, I don't know if I can curse on this, but I was scared shitless after the first time. And I was just like, that was crazy. Like, I don't know if I want to go back again, but I did want to, but I was almost too nervous to.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe a little time went past between the first time I went in and then like, you know, 3-4 weeks later or something. I was like, okay, I'm just going to like call. And so I went back. And then once I went back, that was kind of when it was like, okay, this is going to happen. And like soon, you know, I was maybe like a freshman or sophomore in high school at this point. I was pretty early, and I just started going like as much as I could. And that led to me being there, you know, a handful of days of the week after school. And then
you worked yourself into being pretty valuable.
I don't know if I was valuable, but they treated me like I was, honestly.
Yeah,
and that was, you know, something that I do think made it better for me. It wasn't. I was respected more than probably I should have been.
Okay.
And people were nice to me and like were kind to me in this kitchen. This is a place called Mary Elaine's, which ended up being like a 5-star restaurant, which was rated by Mobile at the time. There was no Michelin or like whatever in the States at that time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was probably like the nicest restaurant in Arizona at the time, and like the most well-regarded eventually. And it was just by complete luck that I ended up there. But yeah, because of the environment, people took it pretty seriously. So there were many restaurant moments, so to speak, of serious things and altercations and blowouts and all of the crazy stuff that happens in restaurants. But I think also I felt like, I don't know, I was treated pretty well. And, you know, I think there were a few people who were like, oh, this 14-year-old kid is here. Like, get this guy the hell away from my station. Why is he touching my shit? But for the most part, most people were like, you want to learn how to do that? You know, do this first. And then, like, eventually you'll do that.
That's great.
And so it wasn't just like instantaneously. It's a different world now. Let's just say this. Because of the internet, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It also creates like more growth can happen faster now.
Sure.
Because you can find out more quickly.
Instantaneously, sure.
But there are also steps that like help people become really good at this. And a lot of times it's easy to go from 1 to think you're ready for 10 because of the information that is available, and sometimes there's much more nuance to it than that. So it wasn't like, hey, you want to learn how to make this sauce? Like, I'll show you right now. It's like, hey, you want to learn how to make this sauce? Pick this parsley for the next 6 months, and then we'll put you over there, and you'll learn how to make a salad dressing, and then that, and then that, and that's but I stayed a long time. And so eventually I did learn how to do a lot of that stuff there, which was super, super cool.
And that's great. And that's amazing. And you eventually worked yourself into like an actual paid employee, if I'm not mistaken.
I did.
Because that was not what initially happened.
No, so I worked there for free from 14
Internship.
Internship. Apprenticeship is kind of what I thought of it as.
There you go.
Till I was about 16. Sometime when I was 16, I believe I started getting paid like, whatever the minimum wage was at the time.
Sure.
It was like $6 an hour, $7 an hour.
I remember that.
And they kind of moved me into like where the pastry, like dessert station,
Nice.
which was cool. And I would show up after school and like, there's a hotel, so there was a pastry shop. So they
Okay.
like prepped a lot of the stuff. And then I would just kind of like work service and like assemble desserts, which also meant I was there pretty late sometimes.
Yeah.
Because desserts are like the last thing to go out. And so I was like leaving, well after midnight and like waking up to go to school like real early. But back then, it just like didn't. I don't know why it didn't faze me. I was probably a little crispy at school, but
Resilient kids.
well, yeah. And I was at the time I was going to like this all guys private Jesuit high school called
there you go.
Brophy, which was like you go there if you want to get into like a really good college or whatever. And it was
Yeah.
expensive. Like my parents were spending a lot of money to send me there, and we were not like rich by any means.
Sure.
So like. At a certain point, I was just kind of like, listen, I don't want to go to college. I want to do this, whether that means culinary school or just this, like working. Maybe I should go back to public school and save some money.
Yeah.
And then just, because also Brophy was incredibly difficult. It was hard. It was a hard school. And doing both, I was kind of like, I like this.
Right.
And so I did. I ended up transferring to like the high school in my neighborhood, a public school.
Sure.
And that took a little bit of the like, stress of school off. It was a little easier,
Yes.
but yeah, that was the focus was I was in the restaurant crazily.
So I'm assuming your parents had different plans for you.
I mean, they at least, I don't really know what they wanted me to do. I didn't have parents that were like, you should be a doctor or a lawyer. I never heard that from them.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know if they fully understood like what I was doing, but I think they understood that I was into it. And I think maybe my mom had more hesitation than my dad did, but I remember distinctly the moment when it was like Alex, the chef, he came to my house, or like I had a meeting with my parents and was like, listen, I don't think he should go to culinary school. He should just stay with us and like come to Vegas. We're doing this thing. And this was in like 99 when I graduated. He had gotten an offer to open a restaurant in Las Vegas in the Mirage Hotel. And I was debating whether I was just going to, when I graduated, I would go to culinary school or whatever.
For sure.
And it was kind of like, he's already learned a lot of the stuff he will learn there, but we'll continue to, basically help foster those things.
Yeah.
So I ended up, so he kind of had to like convince, like, I don't think my mom wanted me to do that. Like, she wasn't like, oh, graduate high school and move to Las Vegas. That's a great idea. I don't think anyone's mom is like, that's a freaking great idea. Go do it, buddy. So that was definitely not in the plan, I'm sure. But it ended up happening. And yeah.
So off you go to Vegas.
I did. I graduated like May of 1999. I was still 17 years old.
Had to be easy to get an apartment.
I moved in with a couple guys that I knew already, because that was part of it, is like most of the team from the restaurant that we all worked together in Phoenix, who I'd become fairly close with, moved to Las Vegas as well. A good majority of them. Now, these guys were a lot older than me. That's the thing. They were like in their mid-20s. I was a teenager. Sure. So, yeah, I moved there, and I moved in with this guy named Scott Roos and this other guy named Dan Rossi. And they taught me a lot about life and a lot about cooking. And honestly,
there's your college.
I mean, I'm forever grateful to those guys, honestly, because without them, I definitely wouldn't still be doing this.
They still in the game that you know of?
One of them is.
Okay.
The other one is now, like, he owns his own plumbing company in Arizona, and he flies, like, these crazy things with they got, like, an engine on them and a parachute. I don't know what they're called, paraglider or something.
Oh, yeah.
Big thing out in Arizona because, there's no like trees, so it's just desert, big sky, not a lot of rain.
That's crazy.
He always liked heights. He was always like skydiving and stuff back when I knew him. That was not my thing. But that man taught me a lot about cooking and just a lot about living. And they were good people too. So we did our fair share of things, but also, they taught me how to be respectful. So
that's good. That's great. Well, there you guys opened that restaurant. What was it like opening a restaurant? And I assume that was the first time you've opened one.
Well, yeah. So when I went, when they all went, they went a little ahead of me because I was still in high school.
Okay, yeah.
And so it was like this space was going to be sort of renovated, and I think they started it as like Restaurant Alex Strata or something, just temporarily, and then it turned into a different restaurant, which was called Renoir.
Okay.
Which was like a sister restaurant to another restaurant that I believe is still there in the Bellagio called Picasso.
Okay.
Picasso had like Picassos on the wall. Renoir had Renoirs on the wall. It
Sounds
was like
right.
a real, it was a different time. Like, here's a blank check, create a crazy, opulent,
very Vegas
thing.
back then.
And so when I went, basically it was like right as the transition to Renoir was like happening.
Okay.
I don't necessarily remember being like, oh, we're like hustling to open this restaurant, mainly because this is also a hotel. This was a Mirage, so there were like 20 restaurants in the hotel, ranging from little kiosks to nice restaurants. Back of the house was interesting there. There were like multiple kitchens that were kind of all sort of adjacent / connected by random little hallways around like big dish rooms and things. And, there was like, I don't even know, there were thousands of people that worked in that hotel. So it's like getting your uniform could take 30 minutes because it was on like this crazy carousel. But yeah, I just remember, so I guess I don't remember the specifics so much of like, not like when we opened this where it was like, oh, I got to be doing like
everything.
I got to be installing that shelf or trying to get these plates where they go or whatever. It was kind of like ready to go. And I just remember things happened really fast at that restaurant though, for like all of us, but specifically for Chef, because that was kind of when like a lot of the sort of notoriety was kind of happening for him. And that restaurant sort of went from like, it's a brand new restaurant to like 5-star mobile rating in like 6 months, which at the time was unheard of. And it was on like the Zagat Guide and like all these, quote, celebrity chefs, which weren't big at the time, but they were big to us.
Sure.
Were coming. And it was just a really cool time to be there. And I was also young and like so dedicated that maybe for me it was like different than for the guys that were like 30 years old there.
Well, and you were
like
impressionable and
like I don't remember that many bad times in those kitchens where I'm sure if you talk to the guys that are maybe a little older, they were like, that was rough, man, But like, yeah, it was pretty cool.
That's awesome. How long were you there?
I was there from like 99 to like 2001.
Okay. All right.
Not super long. Basically around that time, I'd given up most of my high school years to work, honestly. And I just Vegas was a little tough for me. I didn't love it. I was also like not old enough to do a lot of the things that get you in a lot of trouble in Vegas. I wasn't 21, so I couldn't really like drink in public or whatever, but just the lifestyle was a lot.
Yeah.
And
start to wear on you a little bit?
Yeah, and I had friends back in Phoenix and stuff, and I didn't really like spend a ton of time with them in high school because I was at the restaurant a lot, so I just kind of got a little crispy and a little burnt out.
Yeah.
And was like, I think I just kind of like need to move back to Phoenix.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say there was like a rift there or anything, but I don't think that like Chef Strata didn't really think that was I was ready to leave at that time, but I was kind of like, maybe my skill set wasn't ready, but like my mind was ready. Like I just didn't want to be there anymore.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the restaurant that I didn't enjoy. It was just the rest of it was tough. And, you're 18 living with a bunch of 25, 28-year-olds. And it's just like they're in a different stage in their life. And it was like I just kind of wanted to be like, quote, a kid for a little bit.
Sure.
So, yeah, that was kind of when I left. But I was there for like Y2K. I mean, I remember like New Year's 2000, in Vegas. I was like at a friend's house, like watching it on TV and being a part of it. So it was an interesting.
Just
little
waiting
period.
for everything to explode and die.
Yeah,
and the whole bit.
half the room thought it was over, half the room didn't care. The other half was like, well, if it is the last night, we're going to go as absolutely as hard as possible.
That's exactly, yeah, right.
So yeah, interesting times.
Oh my gosh, interesting times indeed. So you're back in Phoenix at that point, and from there, I think, did you go to LA?
Yeah, I took a little breather from cooking for a bit after that. I also play music, so I kind of focused a little more on that for a period of time, and I still always had cooking jobs. They just weren't as like crazy as that one. That restaurant that I was in eventually moved over to another the Wynn Hotel in Vegas and opened under another name, which when that restaurant closed, it closed with 2 Michelin stars. So
wow.
And I feel like Renoir was on that same level, even though Michelin wasn't around at the time that it existed. So it was like, it was a pretty regimented environment. Like we weren't messing around in there. It wasn't like a goof off kind of job. So after that, I just sort of was like, I'm going to do something else for a little bit. Played music for a while. And that's when I ended up here for a period of time. Like my mom was sick in like the early 2000s. So my parents lived out here.
Okay.
My dad was working for Walmart at the time. My mom got sick. I spent a little time here. Then I kind of went back to Phoenix. Then she got like a lot more sick. So I came back here, stayed. And so I was kind of just here sort of helping take care of her.
And what years were these?
This is like 05.
This was not the place to be at that point.
No, it was early, like way early. And my parents lived in Bella Vista, and I was here kind of mainly for...
You were in the woods.
Yeah, I was in the woods in the basement, just like kind of hanging out, playing guitar, and mainly helping with like my mom's health. So, and kind of watching her sort of decline. So I wasn't really like... there was nowhere to work, like restaurant-wise at that time. It wasn't like, I'm going to go work at the best restaurant here, because there wasn't one. I think my jobs were literally just for money and to get out of the house a little bit.
For sure.
And then she ended up passing away at some point, and I went back to Phoenix just as like for the first time in like years as a visit, and that's where I met Danielle, actually, was on that trip. This is fast forward to like 2010. And yeah, that was kind of when I was like, okay, maybe I want to start like getting a little more serious about cooking again.
And this is Danielle Roboto.
That's Danielle Roboto. She's
co-owner
of both Heirloom and Pinky Swear, kind of handles all things front of the house and so much more, guest relations, all the stuff that I honestly am not great at. She is great at. And she also just had a restaurant background as well. You know, she had been in service for most of her life as well. So it was like, when we met, it was kind of like, oh, yeah, okay. We understood each other pretty well as far as like what we'd done job wise.
Sure, of course.
And she had the wine knowledge or the desire for it, and that's how like eventually we ended up doing this together. Is just because like I don't even think I'd be doing this if it weren't for her. Like as far as I'd still be teaching at Brightwater now or whatever. But I'd be cooking, but like this kind of restaurant, it couldn't exist without her presence.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. And you guys met in Phoenix?
We did. I was there for like a month, and I met her randomly at like a friend's party, like house party after a concert, and we kind of did the long distance thing for a while.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, it was getting a little better here, but we're talking, it was still like Bentonville hadn't even really hit yet.
No.
So I was kind of like, the reason I was here still was my dad was here.
Sure.
And, he was alone, and I wanted to be there for him, whatever. And, I ended up just going back to Phoenix full time. Then from there, about a year-ish later, Danielle and I moved to Los Angeles. I took a job at a restaurant there.
Okay.
And we spent a little under 2 years there.
Okay.
And then that company that I worked for, this was like a plant-based restaurant, like group basically. So they had multiple restaurants, and the owner of the company was like, "Hey, we're opening something in Belfast, Maine." hop on a plane, we need you there in like 4 days. And it was like, whoa, okay, different than, LA, and LA is its own animal, that's growing up in Phoenix and stuff. And that's a big city, but LA was a different thing. So it was like getting settled there was difficult, and just starting to get settled there was happening. And then it was kind of like, move to the other side of the country, like the polar opposite of this place.
Yeah. Quick flight.
Yeah. Which I don't like to fly, by the way. So, that was a tough one, but
you're medicated.
I was. There's one time that I take pills in a large quantity, and it's when I get on an airplane.
Oh no.
But yeah, it's gotten better, but
okay,
things have gotten a little weird recently. So anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how we ended up in Maine. And
okay.
So we were there for again a little under 2 years, like a year and a half.
How was it? Because you're kind of, it sounds like it's not very metropolitan where you are.
Maine is amazing.
Yeah.
I don't have one bad thing to say about Maine besides that it gets very cold. I had a bit of a rough job there. Like the restaurant I ran was in a really small town. So it was like, kind of like a seasonal town. So like in the summertime when it's like 75 and perfect, it's right on the water. There's a lot of people there, a lot of like yachty kind of well-to-do people that sort of roll into town and spend like 3-4 months there. And then like by like October, it's already getting cold. And so by Thanksgiving, it's like everyone's gone and the town has like, 3,500 people or so. So like during those months, I mean, we won like Eater Best Restaurant in Maine that year. And then winter hit and it was real difficult just to like, there were nights you do 0 because it was just like no one's going out. There was like 1.5 feet of snow on the ground. And even though it's Maine, people are used to it. It's not like, oh, let's go dine. And, there's the amount of people that are left at that point.
Well, let's go dine.
Yeah, let's go dine. Let's risk our lives and go dine. It's like the same thing that happens here, but when we get like 2 inches of snow.
Sure.
It takes a lot more there. And it was just cold and there were some other factors, and finally I was just like, maybe we should just. I had also when my mom passed away, I got like a small amount of money, and I bought a house here. So I had bought this house, and I didn't sell it when I left. I was like renting it out.
Nice.
And so we had a house here basically, and I was like, maybe we should just like go back to Arkansas, like. Swoop up my dad and maybe go back to Phoenix or something. Like Maine is just, we'd kind of had our fill in a way.
Got it.
And that's how we ended up back here. And this is like 2014 at this point, 2013, 2014. And obviously we did not leave. We're still here.
Yeah. So you end up not going to Phoenix, swooping up your dad and going to Phoenix. You stay here. And
we did. We moved into that house that I had from before. And I didn't know where to work because it was 2014. There were some places, like the Hive existed. I think Tuscan Trotter existed, but it wasn't like it is now. Like we hadn't hit the dining stride yet. Crystal Bridges was like it was when Bill Lyle was the chef there, and it was super cool still. But I was like, I don't know where I'm going to work at any of these places because I was the chef at the restaurant I was at in Maine. Like,
gotcha.
And that's when a friend of mine introduced me to the folks that had the original location for Heirloom, and I started doing that pop-up thing in there. And then when it was like, it took a minute, but once it actually started doing well, which it did pretty quickly, the owner of that restaurant, I think maybe had already, I don't know if she was looking for a way out already or not, but it just kind of was good timing, I feel like, for them too. And they were kind of like, hey, do you just want to like take over the restaurant?
Take the whole thing. Yeah.
So that's how that started. And
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And then you're there for 2-3 years?
Yeah. So basically we took that restaurant over in like 2014. It was like, I feel like maybe a little under a couple years. Somebody bought that building, renovated it, said they wanted us there, but I don't think they really wanted us there, and kind of like ended the lease. And so that was sort of when we closed that location, like maybe 2016, 2015, end of 2015.
Yeah.
At that time, this was like, I don't want to say a flea market, but it was kind of like mall-ish building with a bunch of little booths and stalls.
Sure.
People sold stuff. I didn't really know. I'd never even really been in here, minus just like popping in and kind of walking around. But there was some developers as well as the folks from Onyx that were already like in the process of purchasing this building.
Sure.
And knowing that it was going to be rehabbed into like a multi kind of use space.
Yeah.
And yeah, one of them knocked on our door over there, like right at the very end. And we're like, hey, we kind of heard you're done. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Are you interested in maybe opening a restaurant right around the corner? And that's how the planning for this location began.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you get going here, you build out what you build out, and 24 hours before you open the doors.
Yeah. Wild time, honestly. Well, because the other thing was, too, in between there, I taught at Brightwater for a bit,
That's right.
during that period. So it was, I wasn't, like, in restaurant mode fully anymore. I was in a different mode. I was in a, like, teach academic, like, and I hadn't really ever done anything like that.
It's a whole
when
different
I started,
space.
so I was like trying to learn how to use software, and I didn't put grades in and do all these things that were way out of my scope of knowledge, honestly. But Brightwater was new too, so like that moved from the old NWAC to the new one, and I was came in like right during that, so I was there from the beginning. So that was also like a start. Like it was construction zone. Like we put that place together basically. That's as far as like breaking pots and pans out of boxes and all that stuff. So that was like its own thing. And then at a certain point it was like, okay, I'm gonna leave and like focus on getting the restaurant going. But as construction goes, it's like, well, we said it was gonna be ready next month, but we'll see in like 7 months or whatever it is. Just this building was old, and there's a lot of like historic stuff you have to kind of deal with, and inspections, and we're upstairs, and it's like, I don't even think there was an upstairs restaurant in Northwest Arkansas at the time. So there was like all sorts of like, can we do this? Is that okay? Like, let's go.
That's a lot.
It was. So eventually there was like some downtime in between. So I felt like I was like a little rusty, honestly. But yeah, we opened here, I guess it was like March, April of 2019. It was myself, Danielle, somebody who worked with us at the other location, came back for the first little bit.
Very cool.
Yeah, and we're just in here, like everything that we had from the other location, like equipment-wise and plate-wise and stuff, was like breaking it out of storage and just like unwrapping it all and trying to figure everything out.
Trying to get this kitchen upstairs.
Yeah, it was a little crazy.
Hey, listen, from bouncing around apartments way back in the day, I think I only had one that was downstairs.
They never are,
No,
They
trying to get a
never
couch up the stairs was always the easiest thing.
Oh, I know. Yeah, you're
Right.
like, how can I make a L turn with this couch?
What was that? Was that Seinfeld? Was that an episode of Seinfeld?
It was.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Yeah. No, it was kind of crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I blacked out, honestly. So I probably don't have the details like I should, but I do remember we did like one sort of like the guys who were helping with the building. It was this guy Morgan, R.I.P., who unfortunately passed away a few years ago, and his partner Ward, and a few of them. They wanted to do like a little shindig in here or whatever, and we weren't quite there yet.
Yeah.
But we did a service, like just like a private party in here for them that kind of like broke the ice. And just we're like, okay, this works.
It works.
This doesn't work. That's cool.
Yeah.
Change this. Move this table and that. And then we opened like, I think we released reservations and opened like 3 weeks later. And that was, so we had a little.
Not quite a soft opening, but
we didn't really do a soft opening, but we did a test flight kind of.
There you go.
So
there you go.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, I'll tell you what. When we come back, we'll talk about food.
I like food,
but we'll also talk about your dinner format and kind of describe what the food is. And we also have the Mike Engelman Home Pro Tip of the Week. Sound good?
Sounds great.
We'll do that next, right here on the Flavors of Northwest Arkansas.
Connect with us at Flavors of Northwest Arkansas on Facebook and Instagram, or by email at flavorsofnwa@gmail.com.
It is time for the Mike Engelman Home Pro Tip of the Week, and for that, we're going to Chef. Chef, what do you have for us?
All right. I've got this is a multi-part tip.
This is great.
So the first one is proper preparation prevents piss poor performance.
Ooh.
So, like mise en place is what we call it as chefs. Set yourself up for success by prepping like everything ahead of time. Don't be like cutting the onion while you're burning the garlic in the pan already. Have all your ingredients kind of laid out in little bowls. And then if you're like working off a recipe or just whatever, you can kind of have it ready to go.
We all tend to learn that the hard way.
Yes. That would be one. Two would be ditch like the iodized salt for kosher salt.
Okay.
Which I think is probably one thing people don't realize about restaurant kitchens is like 90% of what we use to season things is kosher salt, either like Morton's or Diamond Crystal are the brands. Ditch the like little thing of iodized salt. That is hard to season with. It does not work very well, honestly.
Interesting.
Last part of that, adjacent, is the difference between me and you, besides a lot of like experience, is season aggressively. I season aggressively. Like when people come to Heirloom and they're like, how does this taste so good? I'm like, I promise that it's not stuff you can't do. Like I guarantee most of the food we serve here, people can make at home. We probably just season it at almost like a third more of the rate than home cooks would do.
That's your band name, your new band name, Season Aggressively.
Season Aggressively. That is it. First album, Kosher Salt.
That's right. We'll be right back.
Your story doesn't have to end. As an organ donor, the good in you can live on. In fact, you can save up to 8 lives through organ donation. Sign up to give the gift of life after you're gone. You'll be happy you did. Just maybe, someone else will too. Sign up online today as an organ, eye, and tissue donor at organdonor.gov. It saves lives.
There were over 48,000 organ transplants last year. 17,000 of those were from deceased donors. 7,000 were from living donors. Now, of course, the deceased donors give multiple organs. That makes those numbers work. Here's the problem. There are over 105,000 people on the waiting list, the organ donor or the organ transplant waiting list. Too many don't make it in time to be able to get that organ transplant. You can help get signed up, organdonor.gov. You can also get signed up by the health app on your iPhone. You can also get signed up, of course, at the Department of Finance or DMV if you're not within the state of Arkansas. Make the declaration when you're updating your license or even getting a new car processed. Please and thank you, as always. And we are back. Chef Jason Paul. Appreciate you having us here.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
Yeah. So tell me, how would you, and this is very high level,
sure, how
would you describe your food? A very unfair question, I might add.
Deceivingly simple, very spontaneous.
Oh, great.
And I guess somewhat technically sound, honestly. But yeah, so I think the food here is complex in its layers. Okay. But if you were to break them down, you'd figure out that we don't really do a bunch of magic tricks. It's just flavors that are kind of like stacked on top of each other, mixed in with textures. And we change the menu a lot, which kind of leads to a very like spontaneous lack of R&D style of cooking. We are not like, we don't try dishes for months and months before we put them on the menu. Mm-hmm. A lot of restaurants that do what we do have like entire departments or total, like a chef dedicated just to like R&D.
Sure.
That are they're making spring dishes, you know, in like winter. So when spring hits, they have 12 perfect dishes or whatever.
Right.
I don't like perfect things very much, which I've discovered over the years, and maybe that's just a crutch to not have to be perfect. But I like things that are a little more organic and a little more human, mm-hmm. and a little more relatable. And I think that leads to us kind of being like, okay, well, what's the menu going to be next week? Because we got to change the whole thing. And I'll just kind of shoot the shit with the guys in the kitchen. and we roll out a menu next week. And we do change the menu here monthly.
Okay.
So minus like a few little things that are kind of staples of the menu.
Sure.
Everything basically changes. We have a format that we kind of stick to.
Well, I was going to ask about that. Tell folks about your dinner format.
Yeah, so we're a tasting menu restaurant, which means you show up, multiple courses of food come out. You don't like get a menu in front of you to pick and choose. Some tasting menu restaurants will give you like, choice of on an entree or something. We just don't do that. Basically, everything is kind of pre-decided. If you do have like a dietary need or a restriction as far as like allergies go, we will accommodate most of those with prior notice. So that's why, occasionally we can be cooking a menu on the fly, as we call it, which means like without any planning, because sometimes people show up and have not divulged their allergies. So if you're listening to this, please don't do that.
That's tough. You got to pivot.
You do, and it happens less than it used to, because people, I think people are more just like used to dining this way now from traveling and whatnot, and we have a lot of transplant people moving here from cities that have a lot of tasting menu restaurants, so they're just kind of used to it. I think a lot of people, it's more like when it's, maybe you and I are going to dinner, and there's like, I invited you and your wife to dinner, and I didn't really tell you fully what you're coming to, and then you show up and you assume there's just going to be a choice,
right? And
there's not, and then it's like, oh, I'm gluten-free, or actually I don't eat meat, or whatever it is, and it's like maybe it was my bad not divulging to you that like, hey, do you have any dietary needs or whatever? Some people just don't like to ask; they think they feel like awkward about it or something amongst their friends. So we do get a pop-up like, holy crap, we got to come up with something out of nowhere.
Where's the peanut butter?
Yeah, it happens. It happens a lot at like private parties, which we do private parties here because the room is small. That's like when it happens the most, because you got like 20 people, and inevitably somebody kind of gets missed, or maybe somebody else like slides into someone else's spot because they were sick or something, and then it's like, oh, by the way, I'm allergic to melon or whatever, and it's like summertime. It's like, okay. But as far as the rest of it goes, the way the menu works is you show up, we bring out the food, the night starts, the night ends, and that's kind of how it goes. And you don't really make any decisions besides like drinks, which are also not on a written menu. And that's where my partner Danielle really kind of comes in. And we offer 2 different wine pairings, like 2 tiers of wine pairing, more of an entry level pairing, and then like a nicer pairing where we have more like Grand Cru wines and really nice champagnes and things like that. Both of them are like 6 pours of wine. Course wise, we say it's like 6 courses, but really it kind of ends up more like 9 or 10, because there's like smaller bites in between that we call like snack courses or whatever. And there's just little things that come like here and there that aren't like quote dishes, but they are.
There's some choreography involved here.
It is a very delicate dance, and like Saturday was a busy night. We had a cook who wasn't here, so we were down a person, and we also, it's something that's different too, is we don't have like a bunch of servers. It's myself, Danielle, and then we have 2 people in the kitchen, and I guess 3 really, and a dishwasher. And we run all the food, like the chefs run all the food.
Oh, wow.
So,
well, that's great.
So we run all the food and we explain all the food. I feel like nobody knows it better than we do. Obviously, Danielle knows it as well, but this kind of allows her to focus more on like the service aspect of like beverage service, and just kind of being there for the guests for whatever they need. And then we sort of explain all the dishes basically.
So tell me about sourcing, how you guys source and what that looks like. I would think, seasonally, some obviously with a lot of chefs, seasonally sometimes are better than others, obviously.
Seasonally, yes, that's basically, so the menu changes monthly, which I said before, but that kind of means it's like almost more than seasonally for us. It can be like micro seasonally.
Okay.
Like in spring, maybe asparagus is here, but it's not going to be here for all 3 months of spring or whatever. Okay. So we have relationships with people that I especially have just like and even like our sous chef Graham, he went through the farm program at the University of Arkansas.
Okay.
It's called CAF. So
yeah.
he is actually starting a farm.
Wow.
Which is going to grow a lot of stuff for us. And that's
great.
sort of the partnership is like, we'll buy as much of it as we can. Anything that's left, he'll sell like at the farmer's market and stuff for himself. So we'll have like a little more control over like what ingredients we're going to have, or like we'll know a little more specifically about when they're going to be ready than we do when we're just dealing with random farmers.
Sure.
But yeah, seafood, we have really good sources for seafood, from some of it from just being connected to Maine in some way.
That's great. Yeah.
Others, just people we've been buying from a long time. We have a wild food purveyor out of Washington State that their spring hits, typically about a month before ours does, give or take.
Sure.
And so, yeah, we get like a lot of, they don't really work with anything that's like farmed necessarily. It's mostly all wild food. So that's like truffles, things like that.
Some foraging.
Yeah, like wild spring onions, which we have on the menu right now.
Oh,
because,
nice.
It's early, but they have them. We have them. Caviar, we have someone we work with out of Los Angeles who's been incredible. So, yeah, we do use luxury ingredients, I guess you would call them. But I don't really consider the sourcing or the food stuffy. As far as like how we source, it is definitely driven by the season though. Like you're rarely going to find, like a butternut squash on the menu in summer. It just wouldn't happen really, unless maybe we like preserved it in some way or turned it into like a vinegar or fermented it into something.
That makes sense.
Which, we do a little bit of, maybe not as much as some people. Because we have no space really. Like the restaurant, you're in it, you see it. What you see is everything except for the small room that's behind back there, and that's literally a bathroom and a dish room.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like harder for us to like store a larder of ingredients.
Yeah.
But that's also what kind of makes the cooking a little bit more like, whoa, we got to just like come up with something. 'Cause sometimes it's like, we got this in here. Let's like, it's not going to last. Like, let's turn it into something now.
By the way, you came up with another band name.
Which one's this?
Random Farmer.
Random Farmer. That's a banger, actually.
That's a good one.
That is a good one.
That is a good
banger.
That is a banger. That is a banger for sure. So what's next for you guys? Is it just continue full speed ahead, or is there anything outside the scope that you're looking at?
It's tough. I mean, we always are looking at stuff.
Right.
Being totally transparent, we had a building leased in Springdale for the last like almost 2 years that we were paying on. Last week, we decided just not to do something there. These are kind of crazy times as far as like financing stuff like this goes. And the one thing about Heirloom and Pinky Swear is we've been fortunate. Like it's just Danielle and I. Like we don't have investors. We don't have anyone going, hey man, you should put a burger on the menu or you should do this.
Right.
And so we've always kind of been fully in charge of the decisions.
Very fortunate. Very smart.
For the better or worse, and so, yeah, I don't know. Like, we're always looking at stuff. People are, always reaching out.
Yeah.
If the right thing presented itself, there's like 10 more concepts we would like to do.
Sure.
But this is also a play. Like, there's been 2 nights ever since 2019 that we've been open that I haven't been here.
I was going to say there are not 10 of you to go with those 10 concepts.
And I don't know that there's ever been a night that we've been open for full dinner service that Danielle hasn't been here. So it's a different business. Like the bar out there, Pinky Swear, that's a different game. Like that operates. We got a great team, and they do their thing. This is just such a different restaurant kind of concept that when people come here, I think they expect to see Danielle and I, and if they don't, it's just like weird for them, especially people that have been with us like a really long time, which we have people that have been with us almost 10 years now.
Crazy.
It is crazy.
In a good way.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, especially when you're like, wow, I remember when, you had your first kid and now they're like going off to they're in high school already or something, it's just,
now they're getting married.
Yeah, it's wild. It is wild. And that's just one of those things I never would have thought like people would be that supportive. And so that's been incredible, and that's what has kept us going. And so, yeah, it's hard to turn the focus away from this just because it's like, this little thing is kind of like our baby and our bread and butter, and it's like, financially, this isn't the restaurant that's gonna make you $1 million. It's just not, because the margins are small, and what we buy is like nice and it's expensive, and you buy truffles at $700 a pound, and you buy caviar at $300 for a little tin, and you buy really good quality seafood and meat at $30 a pound. You add it all up, and it's like, well, we did 20 people tonight at $135 a person.
Yeah.
It sounds expensive, but then you break it all down, and it's like, okay, then you got a staff and you got people you pay, and it's like, well, there's not much left, So it's definitely like a labor of love for this restaurant. So sometimes it's like, oh, we should open something that's like more whatever, do 200 cheeseburgers a night and just like bank the cash or whatever.
Sure.
And maybe that'll happen at some point. But yeah, I think cooking is definitely like, you can just tell when the passion is in it and when it's not, and when it's for money and when it's not.
There's no question.
Or when you really do know what you're doing, and when you just were like, oh, like, I moved here for a Walmart job and I'm just going to open a restaurant real quick because, I have some money and we need it or whatever. And it's like, sometimes those things work. No knocks on people who do it, but restaurants are hard, man.
They're really hard.
And they take experience to run them. On the business side too, even if you're like finance savvy. So yeah, I don't know.
I'll tell you what's not hard: interviewing you. I appreciate you, man.
Thanks, man.
What a great interview, and really enjoyed sitting down talking with you.
Yeah, I had a good time. Thanks for coming through.
How can folks find you?
Yeah, so for Heirloom, we have a website. It's heirloomar.com. Instagram, Heirloom 1907 or Heirloom 1907 at Heirloom 1907. We post pretty much everything we do on the Instagram. We don't post a ton on Heirloom's Instagram, but events and things that we have coming up are there. Reservations, you can also book through the website. There's a reservation tab there. There's a reserve tab on our Instagram as well as our Facebook.
Yeah, about reservations before we jump out, that's not an easy thing to get here.
It's a touchy subject for some people. I want to start by saying we are incredibly fortunate to be as busy as we've been.
Sure.
And the area is not getting any smaller, and we are not getting any larger as far as our tables go. So I think a misconception is that we're like some big restaurant, and that's people that can't figure out why they can't get in. We have 6 tables. We don't turn them over either, so it's your table all night. So we only do 18 to 20 people a night, and we're open 3 nights a week, sometimes 4. So it's just the numbers game that makes it hard to get in. We're not like gatekeeping these reservations, I promise. But we release reservations on the 15th of each month at 11 a.m. for the following month's dates. So like March 15th, reservations will open for April.
For a minute.
And they will be gone in like a minute. I got a couple tricks. I'll say it once here. One of them, refresh, hit refresh,
it's like
over and
Ticketmaster.
over again. Yeah, because honestly what happens is the reservation site we use, if you start to book it but you back out, it will hold the reservation for 9 minutes.
Oh.
So let's say you're on there trying to get one. Maybe your wife or your friend gets one instead. They're like, hey, I got it. You don't need to. You're like, cool, I'm out. You're in the kitchen getting a glass of wine. Your reservation is still there for 9 minutes. 9 minutes later, it opens back up on the system. So like we're getting like, messages from people like, I've been trying for 5 years. I can't get in. What's wrong with you? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm looking at a reservation right now.
Yeah.
Because they gave up after the first minute, which is totally understandable. Don't get me wrong. I'm not asking people to go out of their way. But things do open up. So like hit refresh. Maybe go for dates that aren't Friday and Saturdays, like Thursdays. Just take whatever date you can, maybe if that's an option.
This is very much like Ticketmaster.
It's a little wild, although we don't have the corporate oversight.
No. I didn't mean it in that way. I didn't mean it in that way. No.
But you do have to
F5 guy.
Yeah, you do have to hit that. Hit that F5.
Yeah, I'm an F5 guy for sure. Again, man, I appreciate it.
Man, thank you.
Yeah,
this was fun.
Flavors of Northwest Arkansas you can find on Instagram and Facebook. And yes, we've started TikTok. Let's getting there. Oh, it's painful. I'm figuring it out little by little. Thank you. Please tip your servers. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.